Oh, what's up, guys? Ben here, bringing another video today. It is Tuesday morning. I was going to record this video on Monday, but honestly, loading out, coming back from the after party at Live Nightclub kind of checked me on Monday. I'm not going to lie. I was just very busy, so I didn't get a chance to do this video on Monday, but I'm getting it done for you today. It is post-Major 2, Atlanta FAZE were your champions, and it was a very interesting event with some great placings. The top 4 teams all played very well, but there is some shuffle below them. So let's take a look at the tier list and see what we got heading into an interesting week where there might be some roster changes, some map pool changes. Let's discuss it all here in this video. All right, so I've actually added a new tier since the last time we did this. So if you are new here, I don't do the letter thing. I kind of do it this way, and I'm actually modifying it now that we've gone through Major 2 to sort of, you know, try and diversify the tiers now that we're starting to see some teams separate. So finals bound, the way I'm going to do it right now is basically what I think are the top 2 teams. I think that this tier might disappear during the online qualifiers if these 4 teams at the top start to beat each other. But basically, as you probably imagine, I'm going to put FAZE and OPTIC in here for this video. Sunday regulars are going to be the rest of your top 4 teams that I expect to make it to Sundays. Making progress are teams that are in the bottom 8 that I think are making a good step towards really locking a consistent top 6 placing. Work to do are sort of fringe teams in the top 8, top 10 that have some obvious things that they need to work on, maybe an edge of roster change, and missing pieces or teams that I think are going to be blowing it up. All right, so let's start at the top, and we're going to discuss Atlanta FAZE and what a weekend it was for the FAZE team. I think going into this event, you know, people looked at that loss to LAG and they were like, guys are a little bit wobbly. They had to grind one out against Thieves in the beginning of winners bracket, went to game 5. And then from there, you know, I think they did a really good job of managing the rest of the event, going game 5 with New York and clutching up in that last map. And they really dominated the final 2 series they played against OPTIC. And I think if you take a look at sort of FAZE's performance during the split, both online and on LAN, I think they really improved their hardpoint from stage 1. They've got some great bread and butter maps like Karachi. Skid Row's been really kind to them. Rio's been really kind to them. And they're a team that if Invasion hardpoint comes out, if sub-base hardpoint comes out, it doesn't necessarily really hurt their map pool in hardpoint. And S&Ds, they were a little bit up and down during the stage, but by the end, I think they were pretty solid. And then obviously they've continued to really excel in control. And the only 2 control losses they had were on Friday and Saturday of the event. So for Atlanta FAZE, they're your number 1 team right now, with an advantage over your number 2 team, and we're going to talk about OPTIC Texas. All right, so I think, listen, you know, you guys know that I'm pretty fair when it comes to OPTIC, so I think this wasn't a bad weekend for them. Just like I said after Major 1, this is a team that made 2 changes. So unlike FAZE, Toronto, New York, who have been really easy to kind of slot in their add to their system, OPTIC is still figuring out how they want to play and how they're going to maximize their system. And online, going into this event, they were undefeated. They beat New York. And at the Major, it was looking good. You know, they beat Miami. They beat Toronto. Heading in that match versus FAZE, maybe you think the 0-3, you know, series deficit they had coming in, they might be able to overcome. And it just felt like FAZE against them just kind of outclassed them across really all 3 game modes. The only real map that I think OPTIC's really able to match them on, you know, in these 5 matches so far, has been Terminal S&D. Other than that, it's been a real mixed bag in control. I think they've only won 1 out of 5 controls they played, and they've only won 2 out of 9 hard points that they played. So I think right now FAZE with that 16-5 map count over OPTIC is a little bit ahead of them. But as far as OPTIC against like a New York or a Toronto, I still feel pretty good about them, and they are 4-1 against those 2 teams. It's just tough, I think, for OPTIC to overcome you know, the discipline that FAZE has. They don't really lose players. They know how, you know, a Pred or a Shotzzy plays, and they're able to kind of expose OPTIC's, you know, kind of tricky and, you know, issue with their S&D map pool, right? Yes, OPTIC is, again, fine against FAZE on Terminal S&D, but you look at the rest of the map pool, and it can be difficult for them to really attack what FAZE is throwing at them. So for OPTIC, keep working on what you're working on. You know, on Sunday, you had some disappointments from some players against FAZE, but if they keep plugging away at their system on the little things, I think they should be good. I don't really think they're going to be too hurt if an Invasion hardpoint or sub base comes out, because I expect this to a type of map that they would excel on, and I don't see any issues with that. All right, then the next 2 teams we're going to leave unchanged. New York Subliners were your 3rd place team at this Major. They took care of business against Boston, lost versus FAZE in that game 5 we discussed. Bringing on some nerdy stuff on Invasion S&D, and then they whomped Carolina, whomped Toronto, and then ran out to a buzzsaw against OPTIC. So I think for New York, it's kind of an interesting event. I don't really know what to think about New York kind of emptying the tank on strats on Karachi S&D, on Invasion S&D. That was definitely an interesting decision out of them to kind of show stuff that I would have held back, especially how good this team is in search. Like, you can really kind of manage the gap, and now you've let teams catch up to you. So I don't know how I feel about that. But listen, this event is the same thing I kind of talked about in stage 1 with New York. Once we get to land, yeah, they definitely were a great control team to split, but once they got to land here, the hard point was a bit hit or miss. Yes, you've got some great maps like Invasion, like Rio, but they played a lot of sub base, and it was a mixed bag all split. Skid Row, mixed bag all split, and Karachi Hardpoint is still was still a map this, but they really couldn't figure out. I also think the problem for New York is the Rio search thing, because they are able to give, like, say OPTIC their best map, even though New York beat them on it, and I respect it. I'm a little concerned that New York needs to get the ball rolling on Rio S&D. So not super concerned about New York not being top 3 right now, because I think Toronto has some more work to get on. But it seems like to me, at the moment, maybe FaZe and OPTIC are a little bit ahead of this New York team, and they have some things to do to get a little bit more consistent and respawn for this next stage. Next up, the Toronto Ultra. This is a very disappointing event for Toronto. You know, they fried Vegas, which was definitely impressive because we thought that Vegas coming in that matchup, that was probably the hardest of the matchups for the winners bracket crew. But then OPTIC outclassed them. They beat LAG, okay, whatever, and then they got slammed by New York. And this Toronto team, you know, had a couple players like CleanX and Inside that did not have great weekends. Envoy had a really bad day, and Scrap did his thing. And so it seems like people have caught up to Toronto. The pack has kind of gotten there, and the struggles we saw online against FaZe and OPTIC are real. This team has had a really difficult split. As far as S&D, their control is okay, and their hard point is actually still very, very good, even though they lost a couple of more this split. I'm not really worried about them in the game mode. So for me, I think that for Toronto, the S&D is the biggest issue. They got to figure out the game mode, get back to what was working them in stage 1, because all these other top 4 teams are great search teams. This Toronto team can't win. S&Ds are going to have to take 3 respawns in a series, and that is going to be very difficult. So for now, put Toronto in the 4th spot. So I'm going to probably adjust as making progress here a little bit. The top 8's very competitive, and I didn't know what to think about some of the results I saw this weekend. And also, I think a number of these teams may make roster changes. So let's talk about it. First up, we're going to start with the Vegas Legion. They lost to Toronto, beat Seattle, and then had a surprise loss against Carolina. So they got top 8, losing to the Ravens, which I thought was disappointing. I thought, you know, Vegas might be able to beat them and get top 6. But it's not the worst of splits for Vegas, to be honest. Like, you got a decent amount of points online. You're in the top 8 spots right now. I think for me with Vegas, you know, thinking about how this weekend went in the series against Carolina, I think the S&D really let them down. If you're Vegas at this event, you know, they were looking pretty good, the game mode online, and looking at it now, they lost an S&D Invasion to Toronto. They lost an S&D High Rise to Seattle. They lost a Karachi S&D to Carolina, and an Invasion S&D. So you can't come to an event and get blanked in S&D. You got to play better at the game mode. S&D wins championships. They didn't play well in search, and so they got to work on that coming into the next split if they want to try and get a better placing of this one. But I still like this team. I like them online. I'm leaving them and making progress. All right, next up, and I can't believe I'm doing this, is moving LAG to this spot, at least for now. Surprise placing from LAG, and they went on a really nice run coming into this event. You know, after Thieves had beat them online, they had that great series against FaZe. They had a great series then in the rematch against Toronto in losers bracket. They slammed the Rocker in both the Thieves and the Rocker matches. They won first map. They lost first map and then won 3 straight. And then they played Toronto and lost, but they did take an S&D high rise off them. So I think by pure placing, I got to move LAG here just to kind of respect what they're doing. That being said, I'm going to be honest. I'm not trying to be an LAG hater. I'm a little skeptical about, you know, their performance is the end of the split, because I feel like people are kind of giving them their good maps. So I want to see people just get S&D high rise out of here, get sub base out of here, and just play them on any other map and see how it goes. So I want to tip LAG for getting top 6 this event. Definitely respectable, but I'm not super high on this team just going back online and kind of keeping the thing going. And they do have a match against Vegas, Toronto, and Carolina as their first 3. So we'll be interested to see how LAG plays off the rip. And I don't think they're going to make a roster change after their top 6 placing. But as always, one to watch here, because I think Assault Diamond I really think one of them should still go. All right. And just when I think, you know, LA Thieves have kind of turned the corner as a team, just when I thought that maybe, you know, they might be kind of those guys, maybe, you know, feeling like a top 6, they go to a major and they get double rounded and they get 0 points. And, you know, this was an event where, like a number of these teams, they just couldn't win S&Ds. They lost 2 to FaZe, and they lost 1 to LAG. And as decent as these guys looking hardpoint, looking respawn, which I don't think was too bad this event, they couldn't win searches, and that's why That's why I think I'm going to move them down a tier for now. There's a lot of competitiveness within the top 8, but I think Thieves' S&D issues at this LAN have to make me move them down, and just consistency issues. I do think they are likely going to make a roster change. Word on the block is that the LA Thieves team was around the Challengers pit once they were eliminated on Friday all weekend, kind of scouting people. I expect that Afro is probably off this team and that somebody will be coming in, and we'll find out later this week who that is. And while they're here, let's also talk about Boston. I'm going to be honest with you. I got to move Boston down. 2 missing pieces. They pull up this event, lost to New York 3-1, and they looked pretty good first map on Skid Row. I was like, okay, we beat New York on Skid Row. That's pretty respectable. They lost a kind of tough terminal S&D and then the control issue, and then they got waxed last map on sub base. Like, that's just the Boston Breach in a nutshell. They play up and down to people, but I just don't know if this team has it to close that series. And they played Minnesota, and I was like, okay, well, this is a tough series, and they fried Minnesota first map. Again, came out hot, got slammed the next 2 maps, won a pretty convincing hard point on sub base, and then didn't look good in search. This team has to get better at S&D. That's a common theme for a lot of these teams we're talking about. Not good at S&D. Boston, I think, has a big decision to make with where they are in the standings about whether they want to proceed with their sub duo, and if they're going to make a change. So I'm moving down to missing pieces because I think this team's not going to get better without a roster change. So I'm curious to see what they do this week. All right, I'm going to move Carolina up a tier because I think over the last few weeks, they've shown some fight in this team, and I really liked what they did this event. Obviously Miami was reeling, and we'll get to that in a second, and they took care of business against them in losers bracket. They grind out a win against Vegas, and then they came up short against New York, and that's really the issue with Carolina and why we're moving into making progress. They have 0 chance against the top 4 teams, but against all of the 8, I think they can be competitive because it seems like this team, at least what I see from the major, it looks like they might have turned the wheel a little bit on S&D, and I want to see going into the split in which you're going to play Seattle, New York off the rip, if that S&D improvement really sticks. Because if it does, I think they can kind of, put themselves in a position like Vegas did last year, where they can find their bread and butter respawn maps, even though their sling's not very good, and kind of grind out these series if they're a good S&D squad. So they went from being hopeless in S&D stage 1 to I think being decent in this stage 2. And I'll tell you, actually, the record in stage 2 in S&D was 6-6, 5-5 in control, 4-7 in hardpoint. So they're even across the board outside of hardpoint, which I expect because Slay on this team is not that good, and they keep playing evasion. They suck at it, but all the other maps are decent. They have some fight, but not enough talent, I think, to really move up a tier just yet. All right, so everybody at the bottom here, I think for me is in a roster change territory. Let's start with who we start with. Let's start with the Minnesota Rocker, who I'll put ahead in this tier. I think something like this ranking probably makes me feel solid because Minnesota did beat Boston at this event in losers bracket in game 5. And they lost to LAG. And I just think, again, we've talked about time and time again with this Minnesota team. We've seen it all split. I love Big Wake, the solid guy, had a great couple of years here, but I think his time on this team is over. They're too inconsistent in hardpoint. They're too inconsistent in S&D. They're too inconsistent in game 5. This team doesn't know how to close maps. I think they're making a roster change during this split. They, like LA Thieves, were a team I heard a lot about scouting challengers over the course of the weekend. So we'll see if they are also making moves this week to pick someone up. And I think the map pool adjustment, right? We're going to probably talk about it in a video, later on this week. What's going to happen with Invasion Hardpoint? What's going to happen with sub-base Hardpoint? Are we going to bring a new control map? Are we going to bring a new search map? This is a team that is not that good at Invasion Hardpoint, not that good at sub-base. So the map pool change, especially in respawn, could really benefit this team in finding a new sort of bread and butter Hardpoint map. Because outside of like Rio, and they're actually pretty decent at those first map Rios. The other maps are So we'll see how that affects us. I don't want to spend too much crazy time on these next 2 teams. I mean, Miami came and didn't win a single map. This major, they're now 0-12 on land this year, which is pathetic. I don't know how else to put it. You've had 4 series. You telling me in 12 maps, you guys can't win one against OPTIC, Vegas in major 1, OPTIC, and then Carolina. Like, you can't take one. This Miami team is fundamentally broken. I'm curious what's going to happen with Rail probably coming in here, but they got to get it going. They're in a real trouble right now, points wise. It's not over. They're not like completely out of chance qualification. But with Boston, Toronto, Thieves, OPTIC, New York, Seattle, and LAG, now is the time to get going with that stage qualifier schedule to try and get points. It's going to get late early out there for this Miami team about qualifying for champs, and they laid an absolute egg at their home major. And the next up is Seattle Surge. And, you know, it's been tough times for Seattle, obviously. We talked about the thing. And they were kind of put out of their misery at this event, only winning an S&D high rise against Vegas, but losing 3 respawns. That's basically the MO for this team, right? They've tread water in Search All Split, but they are 3-17 in respawn. 3-17. They've won 3 of 20 this split. I mean, I just think when you watch them play, they are reactive. They're reactionary respawn team. They don't control the game. They just kind of ebb and flow with the tide of things, and they're never going to be good at respawn unless they can kind of master the art of really kind of pushing pressure to opponents. So I don't know if they're going to make a roster change. I know what's going on with the Seattle camp. They're kind of waffling about, but they only won 1 match this whole split, and they're in real trouble, I think, of keeping sliding in the standings after a pretty solid stage 1. So let me take a look at these again. FAZE OPTIC, I really like the order of that. New York, Toronto. Vegas, LAG, I like. Even though I'm not yet a convinced fan of LAG, I want to give them the respect to move up here. Thieves and Carolina. But I like that order. I mean, have those 2 teams played each other recently? I don't really think they have. But I trust Thieves more. I trust Carolina. I mean, Thieves at least took a FAZE to a game 5. So I'll put them there because I do think the lack of search wins means I really can't move them up a tier. And then the bottom I feel really good about. So I think this ranking to me feels really good sense for how the league is right now. We had a couple of weeks, some roster changes, some map pool changes. We'll get right back into it for the Major 3 qualifiers coming soon. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about the video. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.